Hello and welcome everyone to the Electric Bike Laboratory podcast. I am Miles, I'm your host, and today is episode 1. So we're very excited to be able to do this podcast. Hopefully it won't only be one episode, but we were fortunate enough that our friend Marty gave us some very nice audio equipment to begin to record. And today we're pressing play. So our first guest today is battery building extraordinaire Samil Goodamuni. Samil has been working for affordable e-bikes for about 2 years now, and Samil's built probably somewhere around close to 1,000 batteries. He's the lead battery builder at Affordable E-Bikes right now, and he's a wealth of knowledge. He's something that we can learn a lot from, and he's got a pretty cool story growing up. He studied at university at McMaster University, but before that he came to Canada from Sri Lanka when he was about 10 years old, and has been living life here happily and appreciative of living in Canada, and he expresses that very commonly, which is really refreshing to hear, especially in the days that we're living through right now. But yeah, Samil, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, no problem. Hello.
So do you want to give us like a brief history of, for one, coming from Sri Lanka, and then 2, how did you get into e-bikes and how did you get into batteries? Building batteries.
So Sri Lanka, as you know, right now it's at a very bad state. But even before, it's a third world country, so not too many opportunities out there. And my parents thought that if we migrated to a different country, there will be better opportunities for all of us, better education for me and my siblings. So they applied to a bunch of countries, and then Canada was one of the countries that they got accepted by. And then in 2010, we made the move here in 2010 May, and I was just 10 years old when I got here, and it was really wonderful. I think that was probably the best thing that ever happened in my life, was moving to Canada. And I moved to Brampton, Ontario first, then from Brampton we moved to Guelph, Ontario, where I lived most of my life, and then recently moved to Kitchener. And getting into e-bikes, so our capstone project, which is sort of our final culminative project in university, where we kind of have to apply all our knowledge we learned throughout the 4 years and different courses and make a project, make something, anything basically they let us make, but it had to be obviously complex, and we had to use our engineering principles to make it. And I was in a group with 2 other guys who were my friends, and we were kind of working through ideas, seeing what we could make. And we were kind of seeing, what if we could power something like a light bulb while we were riding a bike using human power. And then we realized, okay, that's not a good idea, because it would take so much work to even power something like a light bulb from a person riding a bike. So then we thought about bikes, and then our professor was like, why don't you guys look into electric bikes? That's when kind of like a light bulb went off in our head, and we were like, okay, electric bikes.
No pun intended there.
Yeah, no pun intended, but and then we were like, okay, electric bikes. So let's see what electric bikes are all about. And then we started researching through electric bikes, and that's sort of how I got into it. And crazy thing is, our capstone was in 2 parts, the course. So we did it the 1 semester and then another semester after. So the first semester was all research, kind of looking into what our project is, what our idea is, kind of putting it all together theoretically, nothing practical. So we were doing research, and our first idea I got was from watching a YouTube video where a guy just used a brushless DC motor, where they put like a sprocket, like a gear on it, and then that drove the rear wheel of the bike, which was then I looked at that, and then I was like, that's a cool idea, I could use it. And then I realized that's way too complex, because just using a hub motor or a mid-drive motor is way easier to convert a bike
Was that like an RC or like one of those small, super fast spinning brushless motors?
Yeah.
Was that like the Eric Stanton or whatever, the guy on YouTube, the redhead, the ginger guy?
Yeah, and then he 3D printed his gears, and I think you've seen that video.
Yeah, very cool.
Very cool, but very complex, and a lot of extra work that it needs to be, right, to just convert a bike into electric.
Yeah,
right?
that was a really cool engineering kind of exercise for him to go through, because even the one that I saw at the end of his video, he compared it to a hub motor, and it still had less performance than a direct drive 1,000-watt hub motor. And he went through all that. But what was cool about it was the motor was so tiny, the one that I remember.
Yeah.
And then he kind of built his own gear reduction, and kind of funny, just like all these things snapping along the way as he was trying.
He was trying, his different printed parts, 3D printed parts, just snapping when he was riding. But yeah, that was ultimately, I got to the end of the video, and he's like, yeah, it's still not as good as a hub motor. So
that was 2019 that you started that capstone?
Yeah.
Okay.
2020.
2020? Okay.
Yeah.
And so right now it's December of 2022, so that was maybe almost 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
And had you ever had any experience, or had you ever seen e-bikes before, or had you ever known about them or come across them, or?
Yes, I knew about e-bikes, but not exactly how they worked. I just knew they run off an electric motor and a battery. That's about it. So when I started looking into it in my course, doing my project, that's when I started to come across all these things. And really, I learned a lot when I started working at Affordable E-Bikes. That's when I really learned a lot, the different types of motors, what they're good for, how a battery works with the motor, and all those different things. So I would say I didn't know a lot about it at first, but then when I started working with electric bikes, that's when I learned a lot, and really the details of how an electric bike works.
Right. Yeah, so that was when you did your co-op term with us. So, for some context, you studied automotive and vehicles engineering technology at McMaster University. It's a university degree as well as a college diploma kind of combined in one. One of the newer programs that universities are starting to pump out is technology programs. Ultimately graduated with a bachelor's degree in technology. Pretty cool education, I must say, if you get to do an electric bike for your final project. I'm sure there's a lot of people that wish they could have gone back in time when they went to university and done an electric bike for their final capstone project. So do you want to talk about that bike and how did that project go, and how was it working with people and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the project overall was good, I would say, because at the end result is getting a good mark, right? So our professor was pretty happy, and it turned out to be a good project. But there was some challenges, obviously, I ran into while building the bike. So one of the biggest challenges and the biggest setback was our controller burning out on us when we were testing it. So that was kind of happened last minute, so we had to switch everything over to a cheaper controller, and we couldn't even use a display with our bike. So for the circumstances we had, it turned out to be pretty good. And it was sort of tough working with group members because the pandemic, and then a lot of it, we didn't meet up a lot as much as we should have. It was just a lot of discussing ideas online because all our classes were on Zoom. And then we really didn't have a lot of time to put together our ideas to application. So that's where the biggest challenges I had. And but overall, I would say the project went pretty good. Everybody was really excited to see it. I think we were the only group in our capstone class that did a live demonstration. Every other student kind of recorded their video of their project, and I think that's where people were excited to see. And we were the only one, I think, in our program that did an electric bike. A lot of people seem to be doing drones and robots and things like that. So it was pretty cool. Our project was really unique, I would say.
Yeah. Sounds like doing a drone would be pretty cool too, doing a robot. So your capstone was a donated bike, so it was a pretty cheap, low kind of quality bike, but it was kind of neat. It had a compartment that was it was once upon a time an e-bike, I think probably
really old,
15 years ago or something like that had a brushed motor on it, and it had a compartment for a battery, and so you built your own 72 volt battery, and you were running an ASI back 855, and then kind of the wiring for it was a little tricky because you had a bunch of different things, and possibly something shorted out in the wiring process. With kind of wires. It wasn't. You were building the harness for it.
Yeah, during testing, our motor cable got sliced a little bit, so we don't know if the phase wires shorted with the hall sensor wires, and something bad went there.
Right.
But yeah, also the motor we used was the GMAC 10T motor, and it was kind of hard to work with because it had its own type of cable called L10, and we kind of had to order the female side of it and then wire it into the ASI controller, and just wiring everything individually, like the display and everything was complicated, and before I could get everything to work, it burnt out. So
Yeah, that's literally nothing was plug and play, which was
yeah.
You got the Grin GMAC motor, which is the direct drive geared motor, so it doesn't have a clutch, and it's able to do regenerative braking, which is a really cool motor with the L1019 cable. That is the huge cable with tons of wires coming out of it, enough for the phase, temperature sensor, speed sensor, hall sensors, and yeah, I can imagine now, probably in hindsight for you, something more plug and play would have obviously been way more straightforward. But when you're doing a university project like that, you're totally happy to try building it from the ground up. Yeah, that was a bummer because it was 72 volt. Not a lot of motors or not a lot of e-bike stuff is built for 72 volt. Generally, it's like 36 volt, 48 volt, and 24 volt. Not a whole lot, especially not unless you want to spend some pretty good money.
Yeah.
So I think you got a controller off Amazon that was like $80 or something like that, $50.
Honestly, it was $30. $30. Because I was trying to find a controller that I could get in like a week at most that would support a display and would support a 72 volt battery, but that's just so rare and hard to find. And if I had to order it from China, that would mean waiting a month. My project was due in like less than 2 weeks of time, so I was on crunch time and I kind of had to work with what I had. Yeah,
there's not a lot of options on the market for 72 volt in general. You got like the Grin stuff that with their phase runner. I think one of their base runners can run at 72 volt, but those are $400 ish Canadian,
and they're always sold out.
Yeah,
that's the
and
issue.
They move fast.
Yeah.
And then you got the ASI series, which are good, but also limited availability and pretty. It's a premium product, so it's premium pricing. Not a whole lot of stuff 72 volt, but overall, if you were to go back, what would you do differently on that particular build?
Probably go with the direct drive motor instead of a geared hub, because I ended up burning out my motor too by probably running it with the cheap $30 controller that just dumped like 30 amps all the time into the motor, and then before I knew it, it stopped working, and then I opened up the motor and it was toast. Everything was burnt out. The hall sensors are literally turning to dust, and the grease was like fried.
Yeah, there's a lot of black, which I've never seen.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we discussed that that's probably from the motor just not efficiently operating, or sorry, the controller not operating the motor efficiently, like firing the phases at the wrong time and just at the wrong angle and all that kind of stuff. Like that's where really good controllers, where they actually have to do an auto-tuning process, and you have to find, like, you get a hall map and you get an offset angle and everything. And that controller was just kind of like, all right, this might work. And and just, if the motor is like, ends up just all of that energy turns into heat. So what do you think right now is a cool bike on the market? Or if you had $1 million, what would be a build that you would undertake right now?
Well, I really like the Sur-On bikes because they're, as just stock, it's a really, really fun bike to ride, and it's basically a dirt bike, so it's a great ride. But the best thing about them is you can upgrade them, you can customize them, and you can really make them really powerful and add different types of tires, forks, make it really to how you like it, basically. So Sur-Ons are really cool. I really like the new Super 73 style bikes that are out there. It's just because they're really simple. They look really simple and they look really nice, and they're just very good cruiser bikes. But if I had $1 million and to make any bike, I would probably take an existing dirt bike like a Yamaha and then probably convert that and just make an insanely big battery, probably with like P42 cells that are really high discharge, and make a crazy powerful battery, and then run it with like a 3,000 watt motor, and then just use an ASI controller and really ramp it up to the max. That would be my idea.
So like an actual off-road motocross slash enduro dirt bike.
Dirt bike, yeah. Basically something that can keep up with the regular dirt bike on a track.
Okay.
Which would be hard to do, but something closer to that.
Yeah. So is like with your bike right now that you have a modified 1,000-watt direct drive running
CCM bike.
Yeah. Just like a cheap bike and a powerful motor with a shunt mounted controller.
Yeah.
Just being able to ride on the street and I guess like if you use the bike for commuting, you appreciate it so much, but if you don't use it for commuting, like you have to drive to work, so it's not like you can use your bike for commuting. Is that a big selling point for you? Like obviously a dirt bike you wouldn't really be able to ride on the street, or if you did and you put pedals on it, it would probably look a little bit sketchy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I really like commuter bikes. That's something I can ride on the street for a long time, something with insane range. That's all I care about. I don't really care too much about the speed. If it's a cruiser bike, maybe like max 50 kilometers an hour is enough for me. But the range is what I care about. Because even when I go on rides on my own bike, I get range anxiety a lot, just like my battery dying. And so something that has a lot of battery and can go like 100 kilometers without me worrying about it dying on me. I think something like that is what I'm really interested in. And even with my current bike, I made a really big backpack battery. It's like a 48 volts, 25 amp hour battery, but it still seems like it's not enough sometimes because I use throttle only a lot, not a lot of pedal assist, so it just drains my battery. And so something with a lot of battery would be really cool.
Backpack battery is kind of a neat one because it opens up a lot of opportunity. A lot of really, really nice bikes, like a downhill bike, they don't have a lot of place for a battery. So how is it riding with a backpack battery? Do you notice it? Is it bothersome? Is it sketchy with the cable hanging out?
It can be for sure. It definitely weighs you down. You can feel it, but if you're just sitting down, it's not too bad. So when you're like getting on and off the bike, that it's really bad. So, and the cable, yes. So the cable's sticking out. You really got to route it in a smart way. There's been times where I just accidentally kicked the cable with my leg and it just unplugged and my bike just died in the middle of the road. I have to like stop and plug it back in, turn off the breaker, turn it back on.
That's funny. I'm going to turn off the furnace because the furnace is... All we can hear in the microphone is furnace. For the last
furnace
minute.
Can be loud. It's a really good mic.
Yeah, I can pick up anything. So you've kicked the battery, or like the battery cable has come
loose.
So you'd be riding and then you have no power, and you're like, oh no, what happened?
Well,
or did you know?
I kind of knew because at that time I was using pedal assist, so I was pedaling the bike, and then I kind of felt something touch my leg and catch, and then break off, and it can be scary, to be honest, because like you're like, oh, what happened? My bike's not working.
Yeah, that's exactly. Like you don't know what burned out or whatever, and especially if you're far away and you're on a high power electric bike, that's probably really heavy to pedal with no electric assistance. It might really suck to have to find your way home. So yeah, backpack battery is only mildly heavy. I guess you said 48 volt, 25 amp hour, which is pretty decent size battery for sure. And I think your cells are kind of a mid capacity cell, like a 2600 milliamp hour cell, so quite a bit of cells. And yeah, that'd be pretty heavy. I wonder, like, what could you handle a little bit more in your backpack battery, or are you kind of at the comfortable limit?
I think I'm at the comfortable limit. So when I was first building my bike, I tried to do more. It was supposed to be 13 by 13, so 13S and 13P. But I tried it and it felt like it was too heavy.
It's
so
like 40-ish amp hours?
40-ish amp hours. And that's when I decided to move down to 25. So that would be 13S, 10P. It's actually 26 if you consider the cells to be 2.6 amp hours each. So, but I'm at the comfortable limit right now, but I can definitely go more. But if I go with a bigger battery, it's going to be really a cruiser bike. I wouldn't be able to take it out on the trail. With my bike right now, I take it out on the trail all the time, and it's honestly not too bad. It doesn't feel too heavy, even when going over bumps. But if you were to go heavier, I think it limit your ability to do off-roading. But if you're just cruising on a road, I think you would be perfectly fine.
Yeah, one thing I really like about the idea of a backpack battery is your bike can still look non-electric. If you have a small motor in the hub, or if you have a smaller mid-drive or something and there's no battery, it might be hard to tell that it's electric and be way less prone to people trying to steal it or any kind of theft in general. And also the weight, so the bike itself weighs less, and maybe no battery is less of an eyesore on the bike. Battery-wise, so you build batteries basically every day. Batteries can be super dangerous, as we all know, as we've seen in news with all these fires in New York City especially, where now a lot of bikes are banned from apartment buildings because so many battery fires have happened. What is your nervousness level or excitement level? Do you enjoy it, or are you freaked out, or like what kind of emotions come about when working with batteries so often and so closely?
Yeah, so at first I was really nervous because obviously it's dangerous. I think the biggest danger part about a battery is accidentally crossing the negative and the positive terminals together, whether through lead wires or just from some wire touching them and connecting them together. Even something like a piece of solder, if you drop it on two terminals, it'll just cross and arc. So those arcs can be pretty scary. It's sometimes like an explosion, so it can be pretty scary. But now I think I'm at the point where I'm pretty comfortable with building a lot of batteries. It's just I only get nervous if I'm building a custom battery that requires really complex wiring and tight fitting. So that can be nervous because you want to build the battery safely where like none of the wires are crossing over each other. And so if you have a custom build in a really tight space, you kind of have to do that smart, or else it's going to be bad. Even something like two balance leads from two different cell groups crossing over together can cause it to arc and then possibly catch on fire. But now I think I've built so many batteries, I know how to do it safely and I know what could go wrong. So honestly, I'm pretty comfortable right now, but at the start, it can definitely be scary.
Yeah, for sure. When you first started versus now, obviously huge kind of learning curve, building the packs. Are there any, like, if you were to say like 3 important lessons that you learned, would you be able to articulate on them for building packs? Like, what are some like really, really, really important things when building a pack?
Yeah, so first thing is safety, I would say. Like, just making sure that the cells aren't, like, they have no chance of crossing over or touching each other. You kind of want to have cells separated or have some sort of layer separating them. I think that's the most important part, that your first original design is good, because when you go later on into the battery and you realize that things are going to cross over and things are going to be tight, that's when it starts to get really complicated. So I think the design of the battery is really important. You want to make sure it's going to be built safely. And just when building a battery, you want to pay attention to the details a lot. Like, the details matter. So even like just assembling the battery, like the cell groups, you want to make sure they're even, because let's say one of your groups has like 4 parallel cells in it and the rest of them has 5, and then you spot roll the whole pack and then you get to that last group and it has 4, and then you're gonna have to go back. It's so much work to just go back and take spot rolls off and then reorganize the cells. So I think the original design is really important, and the safety and the details when building the battery.
So I would imagine that most people don't really have to worry about a battery design. Like, most people are assembling a pack in like a down tube battery that have a pre-configured setup. But you are dealing with a lot of custom batteries where people will send a picture and be like, "This is my bike. What battery can go in there?" And it's you basically have to find how big the opening is in the frame with like a scaled measurement, and then see how many cells possibly can fit, and then from there find out what voltage and amp hour configuration can fit, and then build a structure around it, like a case for a triangle pack. So very, very complex for sure. And the biggest thing. Yeah,
even like a down tube battery, it's really good to just lay everything out first and kind of have an idea in your mind how the wiring is going to go and where everything's going to go, where you want your BMS to go. So you kind of lay out the cells in the way where it would line up with the BMS and then your other wiring, like your lead wires and your charge wires. Because if you just go right into it and then start building the battery without laying everything out first, you're going to run into trouble later. Because your BMS might not fit in the case because you put your negative terminal at a certain location and then it has to get wired in a certain way. So I think the original organization of the battery is really important.
Yeah, for sure. It's pretty important not to learn as you go with batteries, right? You kind of really want to know what you're doing before putting it all together, and because if you get halfway through and then something's just not going to work, tearing it apart is a bit of a nightmare, especially when things are welded, and if they're welded with a lot of energy, tearing apart all of the nickel welds can damage the cells, and that can be a nightmare. What do you think right now is missing from the market? So the Suron came out in, I believe, 2016 in China, and then released to America in 2018, and that was a huge void that was filled. I think like a high performance, reasonably priced bike. Super 73 is very stylish, a very stylistic bike. Then you got like Costco that's making these, or not making, but the Jetson Pro, or these tiny bikes that are like $400. That kind of part of the market is covered. Do you think anything is missing from the market? Affordability, performance, something like that?
I think performance-wise, I would like to see like high-end dual-drive electric bikes, because I haven't seen a lot of those, and I've always wanted to make one but haven't got around to making one yet. So I'm just really curious to see a dual-drive bike that does dual regen. That would be really cool, and that could be like a really high-end performance bike if a company was to make it. But yeah, I think that's what's kind of missing in the market, and everything else companies have made, from like low-end, like 250 watt bikes that you can see at Walmart and Costco, all the way up to like the Suron bikes. So I think even beyond the highest level of performance would be a dual drive electric bike with dual regen. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I don't think I've ever seen that either. Dual regen, so you would have control of the front and back brakes via regen control.
And that's really cool, because then you wouldn't need brakes, mechanical brakes on your bike, really.
Yeah.
So you can just use your motors as brakes. But obviously you want brakes on there,
like a fail-safe
brake, but yeah, and you never have to change your brake pads if you're using disc brakes. So
yeah, that would be awesome. So a couple follow-up questions to that then. That would be, like, with the weight of a direct drive motor, most typical direct drive motors are pretty big. Then if you do a geared motor, it's a lot smaller, but most of them don't do regen because they have the clutch. What do you think would be a good way to go about doing a dual motor capable of regen?
Yeah, so I think we talked about this or touched on this subject a little bit, you and I. So I think the way to do it is taking a geared hub motor and then welding the clutch so it can do regen. I think that's the way to do it. And then using two controllers for each motor, but you can split the throttle signal. But yeah, so opening up the motor and then welding the clutch shut would be the way to do regen on a geared motor.
Or I guess do a GMAC on the front and the back.
And the back, yeah. GMAC is like one of the very few geared hub motors that can do regen. Yeah, so you could do front and rear GMAC, but I think that would be a little overkill.
Yeah.
Because it's a really big motor, a really powerful motor, but
that would be fun though.
That would be insane. That would be the performance that you're looking for.
So you probably need, I think the GMAC is a rear motor only, so you probably need to mount. The rear would be fine in a standard bike, and then the front you just use a fat bike fork, and then it should be able to fit into a fat bike front fork. And then you'd need two controllers that can do regen, so like ASI, Grin, one of the VESC series, which, the GMAC motors alone, that's the thing with working at affordable e-bikes, trying to always see like what can be done at a really good price point, or a price point that makes sense. GMAC motors, and then that's why it kind of sucks that there's not a lot of regen capable controllers, or at least that have analog regen or like variable regen, like you said, that have pedal assist as well, because the VESC is a great example of can do regen and it can do throttle, but it's not easy to implement other things like a pedal assist sensor. Though apparently the CYC's new kits are VESC based in their controllers, so but I haven't seen any easy way to implement pedal assist or anything like that. Yeah, very cool. So a dual motor. That's definitely something we haven't seen. And what do you think the e-bike market, as a closing kind of remarks, what do you think are struggles or limitations or points that the e-bike market is going to face in the near future? Do you think it might be like lithium shortages, or do you think it might be crackdown on the speeds of all the bikes, or accidents from all these people that are riding these bikes that are essentially motorcycles with maybe no license? Or what do you think?
Yeah, so I think the e-bike market is relatively new. It's probably taken off in the last couple of years, and there's not a lot of rules right now. So even if you go up to a cop on the street and you ask them, what do you know about e-bike rules? They would say, oh, you can't go more than 32 kilometers per hour and it needs pedals. And that's about all there is. And a lot of people are just getting around that, making bikes that go like 70 kilometers an hour, like 80 kilometers an hour, like these Surons. I see people riding on the road, modded Surons. So I think now that a lot of people are getting into e-bikes, a lot of people are buying e-bikes, especially these like high-powered performance e-bikes. I think there's going to be more accidents, there's going to be more regulations, and I think the government's really going to crack down on it at some point. Maybe not soon, but maybe in the future. Hopefully not soon, because I still want to experiment with a lot of performance bikes and ride them on the road. But I think in the future, they're definitely going to crack it down and monitor and even start handing out fines to people that are riding these really high performance e-bikes without insurance or registering them. So I think one of the things that the government is going to do is classify high performance electric bikes and make people register them as an actual motorcycle. And that might be good and bad. Because you can ride your electric bike on the street without having to worry about getting pulled over by a cop. But then bad because obviously you're going to have to pay insurance and then pay a fee to register your bike and then get a motorcycle license. So I think the one downside is going to be them cracking down the rules and really implementing some strong rules to control or to minimize the accidents and people going crazy on the road with their e-bikes. But yeah, I think that's the biggest downside that I could see in the future.
Yeah, that's going to really depend on like how much that will suck or be awesome is going to depend on things like how much insurance is. If you think about like mopeds in the past, people have paid 150, 200, maybe 500 max per year insurance for mopeds, which is not bad. But when you compare it to like, a young person paying $3,000 to $6,000 a year for motorcycle insurance, if e-bikes fall under that same category, even like high performance, that will obviously suck, and it will probably cause most people to just not abide by those rules, right? So I definitely think that. And then, have you ever seen the Sir Ronster video when he's talking to LA cops and he's like, "Excuse me," and he's riding around on a little fat tired bike, and he's like, I just moved here. I don't know what the rules are for e-bikes. Can you tell me? Yeah, it's 10,000 watts. That's all I know about it. And then the cops are all like, yeah, you're good. Like, just ride in the bike lane, and other than that, there's no rule. They're completely clueless. This is in LA.
I don't think they're informed that well about e-bikes. They're just kind of getting like, oh, if they're going slow and they look reasonable, just let them go type of thing. I don't think they know the numbers. Even if you go up to your cop and you tell them, oh, my bike's like a 5,000 watt e-bike, they probably won't know what that means. They're like, oh,
5 kW or something like that. Yeah.
So they'll just be like, oh, you look good. You look like a reasonable guy that rides at a reasonable speed, so we'll let them go. But for sure, if you're doing burnouts in a parking lot on your Suron, then they're gonna look into it, and they're gonna be like, oh, this thing's not street legal for sure. So
yeah,
it really depends on the cop and kind of the neighborhood you're in, because you could get complaints from other people seeing you ride an electric bike. So
yeah,
really
that's true.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see because a lot of these bikes, the rules are so loose. They have the rated motor power versus peak motor power versus, in the States now they have class 1, class 2, class 3 e-bikes, which I don't know how old or new that is. In Canada we don't have that, but Yeah, very cool. So any closing remarks for the listeners, maybe to inspire them about their own projects, to take on a DIY style project, or any closing remarks?
Yeah, so I think e-bikes are great for everybody because gas prices are always high nowadays. It's it's gone down a little bit, but especially in the summer, if you want to do small commutes, I think an e-bike is great because it's just really fun riding one. Like people don't understand how much fun it is, and it's very therapeutic. Even if you're having a stressful day and you just want to go out on a ride in the evening, it'll really help you calm down. But yeah, if you don't have an e-bike or haven't looked into getting one, I would say definitely do it. And if you just have a regular bike at home, look into converting it because there's really a lot of cheap conversion kits. Even the more expensive ones, they're really easy to install, especially like a hub motor kit. It's like, it wouldn't even take you a day to convert your bike. It's just basically taking off the wheel, putting a new wheel on, and then hooking up the controller. And the wiring can be pretty simple. It's just everything's plug and play in a conversion kit. So I would say go with the conversion kit first because a lot of these e-bikes at Costco, Walmart, a lot of the online ones, they look nice, but their specs aren't that good. So I would say go with the conversion and see how you like it, and then look into building a better bike or buying a better bike. But yeah, if you haven't gotten to e-bikes, I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun and it'll save you money and it's better for the environment. I mean, you got to think about it. Global warming and climate change, all these problems with pollution. I think e-bikes are a very big part of a sustainable future for us. So
yeah, even like things like traffic. If there's one person in a pickup truck, that's not a very good use of space on the road, right? Versus one person on a bike, it takes up way less space. So yeah, awesome. Well, that is episode 1. Sorry for the audio quality. I know it's probably not fantastic. We'll be doing episode 2, and hopefully with much better audio quality, and we'll be talking more about all things electric bicycle. So thank you for tuning in to the Electric Bike Laboratory podcast, and until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
take care. How was that?
That's sweet.
Okay.